So good morning and welcome to the Pimento Business Development Club. So this is our fifth session of the year, and we actually got the sun shining today, so which is great news. But if you don't already know me, I'm Paddy Woods and I'm the director of Pimento Fuse, which is a new business consultancy that is built to solve and energize independent agencies, new business and marketing growth. If you haven't been on any of these previous calls, please use the chat box to ask questions and I'll look to bring you into the call after we've done this presentation. So today's session is all about productizing your business. There have been lots of talk about it, but no one is sure where to start, what you can productize and how to commercialize it. So the session is going to change all that, where we'll be diving into the what, the how and the whys you need to productize your agency. To help me with this, I have the founders of A Few Good People, Andrew Martin, Andrew Radley, and Kieran McCann. So welcome all. Please can you just do a quick round table to yourselves? I'm going to start with Andrew Martin.
Hello there. So I'm one of the co-founders of A Few Good People. I've been working with Andrew and Kieran for quite some time now. I was the CFO and Chief Commercial Officer at a technology business where I came across these guys, and they helped improve the productization of the business no end, to the extent that we had a really clear understanding of how to sell our services, and the value of those services was significantly greater than it was before they got involved. So very happy to now be working with those guys.
Brilliant. Kieran, just to break it up.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Kieran McCann. So I have one of those what do they call wiggly careers. I started off actually on the brand side in the New Zealand wine industry, working for a big wine company in New Zealand as a brand manager. I then, through some weird twist of fate, ended up working as a product manager in telecommunications, and that's kind of really where I got a fairly solid grounding in product management and product thinking. And then ended up working with Andrew in Andrew Radley in the UK for a telecoms provider, and then started working with him in an agency that was then acquired by WPP and ended up as part of Wunderman Thompson, which is now VML, before leaving and starting up with these two guys on A Few Good People.
Brilliant, thank you. Andrew Radley.
Morning, everybody. So second Andrew. My background is in product management and operations. So I've done that in the PC manufacturing space, consulting, software as a service, marketing services, marketing technology, and a whole bunch of other areas. So very, very happy to be here and talking to you this morning about what productization might mean for you and whether it's right for you. So yeah, good to see you.
Brilliant, thank you. Right, so today is all about, so Andrew and Kieran will be doing a 20-minute presentation around sort of the product thinking, and then we'll be asking questions at the end of it. So if you've got any questions, do save them or ask me in the chat, and then I'll bring you in. So Andrew, do you want to share your screen, and then I will duck out?
Yeah. Make sure I share the right one. Right, can everybody see that? Stick it on the presentation. Is that working for everybody?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay. So very quickly on a little bit about who we are. We've already heard about us individually, but talk a little bit about the company and what it does. Then we'll get into the subject of today around productization, what it's about, whether it might work for you guys, and what challenges and steps you might go through to start going through that process. And then, as Paddy said, we'll finish on some questions and answers. So let's get straight into it. So there are a number of reasons we set up A Few Good People, but it comes down to these three key things. First of all, from our experience of working in different marketing services spaces, one of the key things is trying to work out how to win the right business at the right prices, which comes through from telling better stories more consistently and making sure your offer is very differentiated in the market. The second thing is then to work on increasing margins and profitability. That comes through operating more efficiently and setting yourselves up to be able to do that, using that efficiency to then create the capacity to make better decisions. And then lastly, how do you drive the utilization and capabilities of automation and AI to your advantage, not just to the clients? And then by doing those first two things, what effect that then has on evaluation, how you can improve your valuation by doing those first two activities. We've already talked a little bit about us. We didn't talk about David. So David is another one of the partners here. He is ex-Oliver, ex-Tag, has many, many years of experience in the content production side of things, working with brands, building out large content production capabilities for the likes of Nike, Adidas, H&M, and a variety of other clients around the world. And we all work together on various clients in different mixes, depending on what it is the customer is actually wanting to achieve. And just a quick bit on some of our clients. Tangent is a content management system implementation type business. Brave Bison is a bit of a mixture of different sorts of capabilities in the marketing services space, from social chain through to commerce type solutions. Oliver, big content production house. I'm sure you've heard of them. Bacon, I think Phil is actually on the call today. So good morning, Phil. So Phil works with us on a few bits and pieces. And then we've got a few sort of technology clients as well. So OrbitView is a company that specializes in producing equipment for very high quality, high consistency product photography. So if you're in that sort of area, it'd be worth having a look at what those guys do, because it's pretty useful. Edit Cloud is a workflow editorial type suite for content production type situations. The Media Lake is a means by which you can capture all your assets in one place and see them all in one through one pane of glass. So there's another different sort of solution there. So probably most importantly is starting off by sort of saying, what do we mean by productization, this kind of product thinking thing? And we're not talking about converting your business into something that looks like a can of beans. It's very, very important to understand that's not what we mean here. What we are driving at, though, is having repeatable propositions that solve specific market problems. And we're talking markets, not customers. And that's an important differentiation. You're trying to target a market, not just a single customer. Second thing is using that to then create your differentiation so that then you stand out from the crowd, and we'll come to why that's important in a second. Creating a process and methodology by which you do that work. So then it's, once again, it adds to your differentiation and people can see that, but it's important that the customer understands that methodology and really buys into that process, because once again, it makes the customer more sticky to you if they're buying into your process, not just your people. Then driving, how does that get priced out to the customer in a way that the customer perceives most value from what's being delivered to them, and then setting a price that's appropriate to that. And then lastly, driving higher margins by making your business structure aligned to delivering those products and services in the right mix to solve those business problems for that specific market. So it's almost like a layering to the structure. And that's really what we mean by productization. As I say, it's not about baked beans, it's more about making a proposition really clear and then organizing yourself to deliver that really, really effectively, and then standing out from the crowd with the right pricing. So what does the difference look like between a service business and a productized business? So a services business typically has a small number of clients. I see many people say, oh, you should only have 20 clients if you're an agency, because that's all you can really cope with. I'm not sure that's really the right number. I see it sort of used a lot, but it tends to have a smaller number of clients in a services type business because of the level of difference between the clients that are being served. Tends to have relatively simple commercials. Tends to see all revenue as being good revenue, very, very customer intimate. And I think that's a really key thing to be able to maintain, even if you are going to be productized to that high level of customer intimacy. It's about how you do it, not whether you do it. And has also a tendency in the name, it's an agency, to say yes and then work out how to deliver that service at some later point. Whereas a productized business tends to be very focused on doing something specific and doing it really well, being known for that one outstanding or two or three outstanding things that they do. It has a high degree of commerciality across the business. So there's a lot more sort of people who have visibility and drive decision making across the organization that help maintain margins and pricing. Tends to have a stronger ability or comfort with saying no to what might be considered as bad revenue. Tends to have a more balanced view of being intimate with the client, but also focusing on its own strategic goals. And there's a balancing act to be had there. And then lastly, has a clear operational capability. And that is, in essence, what is driven from the top through that propositions side of things. But they're very clear about what they're very, very good at. And they're also, as a consequence, pretty clear about what they're not really very good at and would deliver in a different sort of way. So, Kieran, do you want to pick up at this point and talk a little bit about productization and the two areas?
Yeah, sure. So just to boil it down to something as simple as possible, basically productization works in two spheres. The first one is probably one that you may have heard a lot more about, which is kind of the external sphere, which is around value proposition and how you sell your message out to the market and out to customers. And I think probably as agencies, we're most comfortable thinking about that area. And that's kind of more the revenue sphere, how do you go out and win business and what's the proposition? But there's an equally important, and in fact, we might even argue more important sphere, which is the internal sphere, which is how you set yourself up for consistent delivery, in a way that drives an efficient way of working. And that is your margin sphere. That's where you start becoming profitable. And these two are interlinked. You can't really do one without the other. If you want to achieve better efficiency and better margins, you need to be going out to market in a more consistent way. You need to be selling the right message consistently, so that the opportunities or the work that's coming in is in the right shape for you to be more efficient at delivering it. And then as you get more efficient and more specialized in delivering that thing very well, that then feeds back into your external messaging. So that the two are interlinked. And I can drill down on that a little bit more on the next slide. So when we ask why would you productize? So in the external sphere, really, it's around the value proposition. And when we talk about the value proposition, it's got some characteristics. The first one is that it's clear. You've got a very clear message about what you're here to do and what you can do for clients. That message attracts the right kinds of clients. So there's probably you'll probably hear quite a few restaurant analogies today, but the idea is that you are going out and you're positioning yourself. No restaurant says, walk in and we'll tell you what ingredients we've got in the pantry and we'll cook anything you want, because that's an extraordinarily inefficient way of operating. But that's actually what many agencies do. They have a clear proposition. We are this type of restaurant. We do these things and we attract these sorts of clients. And that proposition is part of what differentiates us. The second thing is that it's consistent. If you can press the button, Andrew. We frequently see agencies that they don't have a consistent message. Everyone who's out customer facing tells a slightly different story. And that creates a lot of confusion because it starts bringing things into the business that nobody's ready ready and waiting for. So by having a clear value proposition, you're ensuring that everyone tells us the same story. That builds your reputation in terms of people being clear about what it is that you do. And it also has a payoff in terms of things like proposals. You can turn around a proposal to a customer much quicker if everyone's on the same page, if you're selling the same story consistently, and you're appealing to clients who want that thing done. And to give you an example, in the technology agency that we used to work in, the average turnaround time for a proposal to a customer before we went down the productization route was probably 3 to 4 weeks, and we reduced that to a few days to be able to get a kind of a relatively solid proposal to customers. And the third area is around selling value. So when you're focusing on that consistent message, you're able to focus on the value that you bring to customers. It's not about the cost. It's not about the amount of hours that you're selling to somebody. It's focused much more on the outcomes. Could be outputs. So, we're not saying that necessarily you need to be on the hook for, delivering revenue growth for clients, although that could be an element of your offering. But it's about being clear about the value that you bring and having a clear story about why somebody would pay the premium for your business. In fact, in the business that we were in, one of our vendors that we worked with said we were the most expensive in the world for what we did. But the reason we could do that was because we had a very good story backing up exactly why we were that valuable, and we had evidence to support it. Then on the delivery side, one of the really key things about why you might productize is it shifts the conversation to your method of delivery. It gives you a lot more control. So instead of being at the whim of the client saying, I want to do this and I want it done this way, if you're selling that story about, your methodology and your way of working, it puts you in a position of control. It gives you the ability to say, I know this area really, really well. This is the way that you should do things. You're applying your methods and processes, and what that translates into is intellectual property. And we'll talk about that a little bit later when it comes to valuations. But by having that level of control, it also means that you can then focus on repeatability. So that means that you're doing things in a more consistent manner. You can then do them faster. You can introduce methods of automation in your process. You can manage your offerings in a sort of product managed manner, and you can do it more efficiently. And that translates into effectively better operating margin because you're doing things quicker and more efficiently. Now, just because you're doing things on a repeatable basis doesn't mean to say that you can't do things differently, that the outputs can't vary. And it also doesn't mean to say that you're producing something that's kind of like low quality and mass produced. In fact, by having that repeatability in your process, and what you're doing is you're building expertise. So people are doing these things day in, day out. They understand the nuances. That brings much greater expertise. And it also brings the ability to continually improve, to make those incremental changes. It's a game of millimeters to be able to continually improve. And that really also feeds back into the proposition and your reputation. So they're quite complementary processes. So those are all the positive reasons. There are also, so that's the carrot. There are also a few sticks out there, and this is not to terrify you, but just to kind of give you an idea about what's happening, and maybe if you're feeling a little bit of pressure, this probably explains some of the reason why. So when we look at the average growth rate of the global advertising and communications industry, it's actually not growing very much at all. It's in the last 5 years, it's grown by 0.1% every year. The entry barriers to the market are very low, and on average, in the last 5 years, there are about 10,000 new agencies created every year globally. So that's 10,000 new agencies competing for the same size pie. In terms of value, I'm sure that you've heard or you may have read the book, the Madison Avenue Makeover by Michael Farmer. But in there, he talks about the actual real erosion and the value of work that has happened in the industry. In 1992, he had talked about a standard piece of work costing around about $435,000. For that same work today, it would now be billed at $124,000. So, we're seeing kind of a massive drop in the value of a standard piece of work. And some of the things that are driving that obviously are technology. And it's not just about AI, that's kind of more recent, but we are seeing the growth in AI. In fact, yesterday I saw the very first fully AI brand advert that's been produced by Toys R Us using Sora. I'm sure there's a lot of detail behind that, but we're already starting to see entire adverts now being produced with AI. We're seeing a lot of pressure being put on our people because of this pressure to be billable, and that's in turn creating quite a crisis in terms of staff turnover, about 30% annual staff turnover. And if you are billing out people and you're differentiating your business on this quality of your people, but the people are leaving or you're getting a high rotation, that's not a great position to be in. And that's actually the reason why having a good value proposition that is kind of independent of people is important. And also we're seeing a lot of brands starting to build their own in-house capability, and that has grown in recent years. The numbers vary, 79%, some say 90% of brands have their own in-house capability. And that plays into the turnover crisis as well, because compare working 12 hours a day in an agency to do pitches and deliver client work versus working comfortable office hours for a brand, and you can see which might look appealing to some people. So that's kind of like the scary stats about if you're not motivated by seizing on the benefits of productization, there are probably some factors that will push you towards that in the end anyway. And what does this actually mean in terms of performance? So when we look at the margins of agencies versus productized businesses versus the kind of most extreme version of that, which is kind of a SaaS business, agencies, I think these figures are quite generous. It says agencies are operating at 10 to 40% margins. I've seen some of the numbers are a bit more conservative and say that agencies are more in the 8 to 15% range. Productized businesses tend to operate at higher margins, 30 to 70%, but ideally you kind of want to be at 50%. And obviously software as a service, which is entirely sort of cookie cutter in the sort of 80 to 90% margin range, obviously with a lot more kind of upfront sunk cost investment. So what does that all mean? Well, it has an impact on valuation, and the reasons why somebody might be interested in acquiring a business. They want their services, they want to want the resources that they have, or they want their clients. Maybe they want to acquire a brand. Quite often in our industry, it's about increasing the valuation, and you see a lot of businesses and a lot of the big agency networks will acquire a business and then they'll strip out the overheads and try and bring that sort of more centralized. Maybe they're trying to acquire some unique capability. We've seen a lot of this in the last year or so around social media agencies. For example, Goat, that was acquired by WPP. Or they might just see cash flow and they want to kind of include that cash flow to grow their value. But why they might pay a premium for acquiring an agency is more around whether they see that there's a strong second tier of management within the agency. So it's not bound to a founder. So a lot of that is around, they can see that there is a business process, that there is some scalability to the business. So in the graph on the right, it's quite interesting. I think, there's various EBITDA multiples that we see for different types of agencies, from creative, like pure creative agencies at the low end, through to the more kind of tech orientated agencies doing CRM or content management or marketing automation, attracting a kind of a higher multiple. And the reason why that is because those on the right-hand side tend to be much more process orientated. They tend to have methodologies and systems that are repeatable and scalable, and that attracts a higher valuation. And the ones who do that well, in the larger scale ones, the ones who are set up for larger scale, in the sort of the line above, attract a premium even over the average. So this is pretty strong evidence to suggest that having a kind of a more of a productized approach to your service offering attracts higher multiples in terms of valuation. So if you're a creative agency, if you're a sort of smaller size creative agency, if you wanted to walk away with about $5 million, you say, okay, I'd like to sell up and walk away with $5 million. You probably need to be clearing about $1 million in net revenue, and on average agency margins that probably equates to about 10 million in total billing, versus somebody who might be in the CMS space, where you probably need to be realizing about $500,000, so about half the profit, and less in terms of total revenue. So it does have an impact in terms of the valuation that you can achieve as an agency. Next slide, please, Andrew. So, the question is, well, what can you productize? Are there things you can't? Well, the fact is that most things can be productized in some way or another. And really, it's not so much saying, oh, okay, I've got a service and I'm going to make it productized. There's really two levels that you need to think about this. First of all is establishing the value proposition. So, deciding, honing in on what is the business problem you want to address for your target client set, and what are you all about? And then the second thing is the services. So that comes after. What are the services that you need to deliver on that value proposition? What are the services that you need to have in your portfolio? And how might they be mixed together to solve those customer problems throughout the life cycle of the customer? And even if you're still, it doesn't mean to say that you don't have time and materials billing as part of your mix. It may not be that everything you do is time and materials. There is a place for it in this mix. But by taking that approach, you can really benefit from your opportunities to do things in a more repeatable way. And the important thing also to note is you don't have to do this all at once. And I know, if you've read that Michael Farmer book, the case study with Huge, they wanted to transform the entire business all at once. It's not necessary to do that. You can start with one part of your business, one value proposition, and make that work. And that's exactly what we did in the agency we worked in. We started with the support services that we provided post-implementation with customers, and we transformed them to be much more profitable and improve employee satisfaction and improve client satisfaction. So it's not necessarily necessary to kind of eat the whole elephant all at once. Next slide, please, Andrew.
Okay, so let's have a quick look at how we do this. So how do we, as an external organization, how do we approach this problem? And basically we do it in 4 different layers. First of all, looking at the business and what it's trying to achieve, create the case for that, any sort of change that we identify, and then getting everybody aligned behind making that change. So everybody's bought into the process that you're going to go through. Then looking at the sort of product offering, as Karen was saying, looking at the value proposition, working out what services and products really make sense in that value proposition, making sure they're packaged appropriately, and then creating a sustainable life cycle for those services. You can constantly assess what are your really, really outstanding services you make all your money on, and those things that seem to be sort of going a little bit soft on you and you might want to retire at some point. Then looking at the commercials of that, making sure that those things are priced appropriately. You've got the process in place to manage your pricing across both where you're starting from as well as what happens during the deal process. Making sure you're able to negotiate it appropriately, so all your teams are all set up to be able to negotiate with customers, because it's not just a client management / CEO type thing. It's something that we see huge value in many people being able to negotiate with clients on a day-to-day basis, and then making sure that everything's packaged up appropriately and you've got a proper mindset in place for delivering in this sort of way. And then lastly, around operations. So how do you set yourself up to deliver those products and services in those commercial models to achieve your strategic goals and do so efficiently, manage your customers effectively, and then enable you to grow your competencies and your capabilities on a scalable sort of basis. So that sounds pretty simplistic, the 4 sort of layers there. What does our portfolio look like? So obviously we are a business that talks about product thinking and productization. So as you might expect, we do have a little bit of a catalog that goes along with this. And basically it's laid out like this. There are 4 kind of life cycles that happen as we talk to customers. And it's important to say we don't come in and say, right, you started at the top left, you must exit on the bottom right. You don't need to buy everything that we do in one go. And for different clients, they'll have different strengths in different places. Some of them have a really, really clear proposition, but their pricing is a bit out, or the packaging doesn't quite work, or they're not maybe set up quite as efficiently as they could be. So it's more a sort of set of building blocks that we use to enable us to deliver a good outcome for customers that we've now got sort of into a standard methodology we can apply on a repeatable basis to give people a good outcome. So there's a whole range of services there, each of them working from left to right, enabling customers to derive value from going through the product thinking and productization type process. And that goes right the way down through the whole set, down into sort of commercial planning, making sure your revenue and capacity management is appropriate, looking at agency negotiation training as well as commercial frameworks. And then on the operating model side of things, making sure you're set up appropriately, your client engagement model is set up appropriately, and you've also got a success measurement set, so you know when you're succeeding or where you're succeeding, and maybe where some improvement could be applied. So that's how we approach it. So it's a standard sort of framework that we follow, and then we kind of make up a program according to the particular client needs. But that's one way of going about it, right? And this is clearly what we do, and we're not suggesting that everybody must come to us to get some product thinking or productization done. If you've got the time and energy to do it for yourselves, we thought it'd be helpful to explain a little bit about the process if you wanted to go about it and just do it for yourselves. And we're quite happy to have a chat with you about how this might work for you. So the first thing to do is, as Kieran was saying, is identify what you're about. Now, what you're about probably should be driven by those things you actually like to do and those things that make you most money. I think we often find customers or clients that are kind of doing work they didn't really intend to do at the beginning of setting up the company, and they're not necessarily enjoying it quite so much because they've been drawn into other things. So identifying those things you really, really enjoy and those things that make you lots of money is a very good starting point. Then pin down what problem you're solving for clients, because that will come in useful when we come a little bit further down the page. But being clear about what problem the customer had that meant that particular proposition was really valuable to them is very, very key. Work out what your ideal charging model is. Don't accept that that customers don't ask for it in that form today. Customers tend to buy what you offer them, not necessarily anything else. So if you have a different commercial model, I would always be out there presenting it, because the customers will adopt it over time. So work out what the ideal model is, and alongside that, identify what your unique selling point is. Why is it your offer is differentiated? And coupled to that, if you possibly can, identify what your unfair advantage is. Why is it you're the only people that could really do that? Because you understand their sector better than anybody else. You've got a set of expertise that nobody else has access to. Your methodology gives you an unfair advantage. If you can find that in your organization, suddenly the prices you can charge and the range of options you have available to you really, really does step up. Think about your route to market. Not everybody sells directly. Some people sell indirectly, like Kaz when he was at the last Pimento event. He sells indirectly through agencies and then into end clients. But think about what that route to market is and how to make the customer experience of going to market and customers buying from you as easy as possible. Then work at your delivery model and put in place a means by which you can put in that delivery model, but allow it to continually improve over time. And then take the product and take that to offer to market. Now, it's not necessarily entirely in that order. You could do some of these things in a slightly different order, depending on the way that you're set up and the current situation that you're in. But basically, those are the sorts of steps we'd suggest to someone if they were starting from scratch and going, right, what am I going to do tomorrow then? I've decided I want to do it. Where can I start? These are the sorts of activities we'd suggest. The top end definitely that would be a key place to start, and then it may go into a slightly different order as you get further down the stack there, depending on your current situation. And that's the end of the presentation for today. So thank you. Should I stop presenting, Paddy? Just
yes, please. That would be great. Thank you. Brilliant, guys. That was really informative and interesting, and actually sort of really helpful, but sort of slightly scary when you saw the stats that you presented. A couple of questions. Please do ask questions in the chat, so people on the sort of listening in. But in terms of that sort of our industry, when we talk about creativity, we also talk it's a process. It takes time, etc. How does productizing your agency actually constrain that creative thinking, or then stop that sort of, make it a commoditized process, or is there ways you can actually sort of keep that sort of inspiration that creative can bring to the table?
I'll take that one. I guess this is, back to my restaurant analogies, and it's not just that I'm obsessed with food, but essentially that question is, are you trying to turn us into McDonald's? And I would say, even if you were running a Michelin-starred restaurant, where they produce the most creative dishes, they still have a menu that they work to, right? So there's still a number of items. And if you've watched Gordon Ramsay's, was it Kitchen Nightmares or whatever it is, where he does the transformations, the thing he always says is, you've got too many things on your menu. Do these things really, really well. It doesn't mean to say you can't do them really creatively. And it doesn't mean to say that there isn't a process behind all of that. If anything, I think by productizing, you're creating the space for the creative. And it's also about selling not just the creative, right? Because every aspect of your business, from how you manage clients to how you bill, the way in which you invoice, the way in which you have conversations with clients, all of those things are sources of value in your business, and they're all saleable sources of value. They're things that you can use to differentiate your offer. So if you're running around and you're doing everything bespoke for every single customer, it usually falls on the shoulders of the best people to do that, to do the pitching, to do the client delivery. And what that means is that those people don't have the time to do their best work. So what productization can help with is create the space in the process for the people who are delivering that part of the value to deliver that part of the value, right?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Then are there any downsides to productization? Because it seems there's a lot of positivity about it, but actually, what are the negatives, or what are the pitfalls to watch out for as well?
Well, I think the scariest part for most people is that you're putting a stake in the ground and you're saying, this is what we're good at. And that means you're less likely to say yes to any opportunity that comes up. And that's the scary part, right? When a client says, can you do this? Or I just would like to, and you know that it's not really a thing that you're very good at, and you say yes, and then you try and figure out in the background, how are we going to do this? Do we go and get some freelancers, or do we have a go at it and not do our best work? So I think one of the downsides is that you have to tough it out and be confident that what you set out to be is what you are, and to actually say no to certain opportunities. Because often what agencies forget is, although the upside revenue looks nice, the downside cost of delivering on that means that it's not particularly profitable. So it takes a bit of courage to narrow your market and say, actually, we're not going to do everything. We're going to do that thing really, really well.
Cool. And I think I'm just going to bring in a couple of people. So actually, I'll just ask Jean's question first. Just on A Few Good People itself, what are the sort of market segments that you specialize in? I know agencies is one of them. I think technology companies as well. Is there any others?
No, that's basically where we specialize. I think, to almost back to Kieran's point, we have deep expertise in both of those industries. In theory, yes, we could go off and work in a third industry, fifth industry, wherever it may be, and solve their problems. But it would require a significant amount of our effort to go and learn the intricacies of that industry, how to apply the experience that we've got to that industry. And it's a fairly significant investment from our side to go and do that. We've put our stake in the ground on two things around marketing services and technology, because we know exactly how to approach those particular problems, and we have a methodology for approaching it, which means people can have confidence that we know how to solve the problem they've got. So we've been pretty pointy about how to go to market and which markets to target. But it's a very good question.
Thank you. Beth, do you want to unmute yourself and just ask your question? Because I think it's quite a valid one as well.
Yeah, I was just, whilst listening to you, trying to get my head around productization. But is it in effect finding your niche? Is it just another word for that, or is there more?
I think it's about creating your niche. I think it's about there's a certain degree of introspection that you have to do to say, what is it that we are really good at, and how can we do more of that? I think, to me, finding your niche kind of feels a little bit kind of like you fall into it and it happens to you. And I think it's a bit more proactive than that. Okay. It's about looking at, okay, well, what are we really good at? What can we do? And don't underestimate the enjoyment part of it, right? Because I kind of feel that in many ways, a lot of the enjoyment that used to be in this industry is kind of evaporated as we've kind of run around trying to do everything. I think, the bits that you feel are fulfilling and profitable, that's your kind of sweet spot. And then figuring out, okay, if that's what we want to be, then how can we do more of that? And what messages do we need to take to market? How do we make sure that we're selling our expertise? If you're selling people, it's kind of like, tell us what your problem is and we'll put some people on the case. Whereas if you're defining the kinds of problems you want to sell, you can approach that with a methodology and a process, and that has value, right? And I think a lot of the time I see we always see pitches where there are case studies. A case study is great. A case study says, we once did this for a customer. What a case study doesn't do is say, we can do this again and again for every customer. And that's what a methodology does. And they take time to develop. And sometimes they're in your head and you don't realize that they're there. And you go through that process, but it's about teasing that out and selling the methodology, turning up to a client and saying, this is the best way of doing something and we can prove it. That is where you can start charging premiums. And I know of an agency that was part of Wunderman Thompson. They used to say no to clients, big clients, Fords of the world. And they used to say, no, we're not going to work with you because you're not ready to work with us and use our methodology. And, people would be aghast. You've turned away several million in revenue because they knew that if they adapted their process to do it the client's way, they'd never make any money. So it takes courage to do that. But it also it's also driven by the confidence that you know what you're doing. And that's why people are paying for you, right? They're not paying for your hours. They're paying for your years of experience.
Yeah, I would concur. It is finding your niche, but it's operationalizing and commercializing that niche in the most effective way. And that takes a little bit of extra time and energy to do that second stage, but there are definite benefits to going down that extra path.
Beth, was that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry.
Right.
I did have another question off the back of that. Can I jump in quickly?
Very quickly.
Very quickly. Yeah, you mentioned about charging on value. Have you got any good resources to look at that? Because we don't charge on value at the moment, but I know that's a huge, another big thing to open and talk
I
about.
think so. It's probably in terms of we'll go and look see if we can find some resources online for you to have a look at. The process we've created basically looks at what are the common tasks that you're doing for customers. What are they? What is it that you're doing for them? And then how do those things affect their business? And then try to align what you're doing and what you're charging against where the benefit lies in their business. And the more you align those two things, the easier it is for them to purchase, because they connect the two together. If I spend money with them, I get this thing that I particularly value back. So it's actually identifying that little thread of what are they trying to achieve, and how can I set myself up to make it look like I'm the most effective way of getting that thing done. And that's, I would say, the easiest way is to identify where the value chains sort of live.
Yeah, I think part of it is also about the understanding of your client. I sort of read a really good example the other day, actually, about two agencies were pitching for business with a multinational that had multiple brands. And one agency, they both essentially pitched the same price in total. But one agency pitched a flat rate for doing certain amounts of work for any brand. You know, these activities cost this much. And the other one recognized that in this company, some of those brands were quite mature and they weren't growing, and they were very sort of heritage brands. They were sort of the cash cows or the dogs. And some of them were the stars that the business was interested in investing in. So they differentiated their pricing and said, for these growing brands, there will be a premium for doing that work because it involves more. And for these brands that are more mature and stable, the same thing costs less. And by differentiating their pricing, they reflected the different value that the client wanted to place on the different activities. The client was, really focused on growing these new brands and not so much on the mature brands. So they went with a second agency. It was the same amount of money, but they managed to express the services in a different value context. So it's not necessarily about having one fixed rule. Value is relative to what a client is willing to pay, right?
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to bring Michael in, Michael Miller.
Hello. Yeah, I was just asking about if we're going to be talking about generalization, where this leaves people who do the things that a lot of people do, like creative campaigning and marketing and advertising and all that, right? Because we've already done this to a certain extent. We've sort of created an offshoot of our business. There's a very, very niche thing around helping entrepreneurs and innovators sort of nail their value proposition and raise money and test the market and that kind of thing, right? That's super niche. However, still, the majority of work is still just doing traditional campaigns, and I don't see at the moment where, from that wider thing, which probably a lot of people is what a lot of people are doing, where the productisation comes from that, if you're still going to be doing all of it, because it's generalization, right? And you're talking about finding niches. So my question is there a future for this generalization if everyone's going to start productizing?
I think it depends on what you think is, what you see as generalization. We've got a slide where we kind of map out the functions of marketing, and there's across a life cycle, and we've kind of plotted out all of the different things that are in there, and there are literally hundreds of things. So, the discipline of marketing is so massive, and you get, the old, we're a full service agency. I mean, how many agencies say they're a full service agency? How many agencies genuinely are full service agencies? I would suspect there aren't actually any, because the scope of the work that an agency could do is massive. So I think full service is a myth for a start. So, what do you mean by a generalized agency? Already, I think in the example you've given is, campaigns is kind of one item in that massive list of things, right? There is scope to further crisp up that message, and it also depends on the types of agency, types of clients you want to work for. You know, I've seen one company who, you know, they've got different tiers of service for the different kinds of clients they have. You know, from a pick and mix out of the box campaign type activity for a smaller business to something that's much more bespoke. That's still a form of productization.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Well, I'm perhaps coming at this from a skewed viewpoint. You're right. There are masses and masses of things people do.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people still major in, you know, on your graph, the creative end of it, right?
Yeah.
And that storytelling and doing that in a multimedia capacity, and in a campaign sense. And maybe my experience has just skewed that sort of that perception.
Yeah.
So let me use an example. So when I first joined the business that Andrew, Kieran, and I met at, I was brought in specifically to help look after one aspect of the portfolio of things that business did, and I joined, and then I said to one of the senior leadership, right, I'm going to convert this entire thing, which currently is handwritten statements of work every single time we do something. Every client gets a different bespoke report. All the pricing is completely random, depending on what people were feeling on a given day, which, you know, generates noise in the system. I'm going to standardize all that. I'm going to make it really easy for customers to purchase this. I'm going to have a standard statement of work where the customer can select the things that they want from us and make it much easier to do that. I'm going to have some standard pricing. It was sort of 3 different structures depending on the value that was being delivered to the client. And I'm just going to make the whole thing much, much easier. I'm going to have a standard presentation deck that we take to all clients that makes it easy for all our salespeople, all our client management team, program management team to be able to talk about it in a consistent manner across the organization. And that person said, oh no, you can't possibly do that. Every customer is unique. And I was like, well, I kind of get that. And they were all unique. It was everybody from Ford to Diageo to money saving expert to Barclays and so on, right? There's a whole plethora of different sorts of needs there. But if you structure yourself up appropriately and you tell your value proposition in the right sort of way, you can still make it, from your perspective, feel very, very simple and easy, but from the customer's perspective, feel very, very personalized and customized to their particular need. So I think there are probably many ways in which it could be done, but sometimes it's that woods for trees type challenge that when you're in it, it's quite difficult to see the commonality of where you could pull pieces out and go, actually, that is pretty common, and I could probably just tell that story in a slightly different way and make that scale in a different sort of manner.
And I think that differentiation between productization and standardization, or lack of differentiation, is probably very helpful in terms of semantics for me anyway.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Thank you. I am very conscious there's a couple more questions in the chat, but we have actually run out of time. So Ewan and Mark, what we'll do is we'll follow up afterwards with you just on answering those questions. I've recorded them down, so we'll be able to sort of follow up with you if that's okay. Otherwise, we'll overrun massively, and I think I am conscious of that. So we are actually also hosting, a few good people and I are hosting a micro roundtable on the 20th of September as well. So we'll be putting the link into the chat shortly on that. So I'm just going to say that is actually all we've got time for. Andrew and Kieran, that was a really, really interesting and useful and informative session. So thank you so much. We will be following up with some key takeaways from this session, and the YouTube video will be shared later, probably tomorrow, on this. So please keep an eye out for that. If you do want to get in touch with a few good people, please let me know. I'll be happy to make that introduction. We'll also be sort of sharing sort of that link on the 20th of September as well, which is actually in the chat now. There's a couple of house notes that I've just got to make you aware of. On the 10th of July, we have our next agency update, which is happening at 11 a.m. This is going to be online, and the link to the registration is going to be in the chat, hopefully, Teresa. Brilliant. Thank you. The next Pimento networking event is the day after, on the 11th of July, and it's been hosted by Agency Works. These are great sessions where actually it's a great way of talking and meeting new people. So I do recommend that you come along. They are in the evening, and it's a really good sort of networking opportunity. As I said, we talked about sort of roundtables. We had our first mini roundtable last week, and we discussed all aspects of some new business. The next one is on the 12th of July, so it's a busy week on that sort of week commencing whatever 6th, 7th, 8th of July. This is going to be talking about client retention. If you're interested, you can register on the link that's in the chat that Teresa shared. It is a first come first served sort of basis. There's about a maximum of 6 agencies in the room. Please do register if you can make it, and only if you can make it. As I said, the next product one with a few good people is actually on the 20th of September as well. So please register along, come along. They are really useful sessions. I think, Andrew, you were on one on Friday, so I hope you got a lot out of it.
Yep, it was really good. Really, really good.
Awesome. And then the final sort of house note is the next BD Club is on the 11th of September as well. The topic is being worked out at the moment, so we'll keep you informed as that comes along. But thank you all. That was really, really great session. And thank you all for attending. And I hope you have a lovely day. Enjoy what is the sunshine and summer that we have. Thank you.